So good morning. I'd like to welcome everybody here to the city of Bethlehem, and I want to welcome our fantastic United States Senator Bob Casey as we say thank you for your incredible work in passing the American Rescue Plan. And asking to come to our great city to see so many in our community and hear about how we plan to use those dollars as well as what our vision is for the city of Bethlehem. And when I look around the room today, I see so many of our community partners, and we share a lot of things. But the thing we share more than anything else is that common goal to build a country where everybody has an opportunity, where everyone is valued, and the point of the government is to make people's jobs easier. And Senator Casey and Congresswoman Wild, who could not be here today, they live by those ideals. They go to Washington after listening to people and folks in our community and throughout Pennsylvania, and they stand up for those ideals about what it means to be an American and what it means to care about your community. And the work that Senator Casey and Congresswoman Wild completed in the 117th Congress truly is historic. And I think one day we will look back on that work of 2021 and 2022 and rank it right up there with the most productive Congresses that we've ever seen. The American Rescue Plan is going to change lives. And I'll say that again because I think we have lost that sometimes. The American Rescue Plan is going to change lives, and it's going to change lives in our community. And Bethlehem is never going to be the same place again. We, if we're being a little honest, are a little surprised that other people throughout the country and throughout the state aren't talking through that same lens that we are. We hate the word messaging. That's a TV word, but it's the truth. And it's how do we tell the truth as loud as possible about how many people are going to be helped because Congress decided to do their job. And that's what you did in 2021 and 2022, and I think we need to give you another round of applause. There are policy benefits that we're going to feel in 2023 and going forward, and those policy benefits have a lot invested in what our future is as a city. We're talking about how we can address our housing crisis, how we can address food insecurity, how is it that we're able to invest more in public education, how can we attract and retain employees to our city and into public service that are being valued and that understand that we're going to keep our promises. And most of all, it comes down to how are we going to build a city for everyone. We've often talked, and I've been doing this for a while now, we talk about if we have the resources, we can do the work. And that's not just here in City Hall, that's here in our community. And you have a lot of our nonprofit partners, you have our school district, you have our city council, our school board that are well represented here. And they all live by that same mantra. Because when we put money into our community, when we invest in our community, the results are clear. And we're going to talk about what some of those results are going to be as we go into the future. But at this point, I'd like to turn over to one of our most trusted community partners from New Bethany Ministries that's doing fantastic work, Mark Riddle.
Hello, this is like a family reunion. It's so great to see you all. And thank you, Senator Casey and Congresswoman Wild's office and the mayor for inviting me to speak today. My name is Mark Riddle. I am the executive director of New Bethany Ministries, which is an independent nonprofit providing food and housing here in Bethlehem and the Lehigh Valley for thousands of homeless and low-income people every year. So you may have heard nationwide, this was reported last month, that homelessness has gone down. This was reported by HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and unfortunately I am here to tell you today that in Bethlehem and the Lehigh Valley this trend has passed us over. 2022 has found a 36% increase in the number of unhoused people since the start of the pandemic. For families and children, that's a 47% increase of unhoused families. And we know from the 2020 Pennsylvania LGBTQ health needs assessment that 22% of local, that's Lehigh and Northampton County, LGBTQ community persons in the Lehigh and Northampton counties have experienced homelessness at some point in their lives. And that number rises to 50% for transgender, non-binary, and genderqueer respondents. So we know the way to solve homelessness is to get people into homes, right? I mean, this is the obvious solution. There's a national model, it's Housing First. It's a model that many communities have adopted. We need affordable housing, we need case-by-case assistance for low-income individuals and families to remain safe and secure. And that's why New Bethany is announcing a remodel and expansion of our residential programming. Instead of dorm room style shared housing, our current housing model, we are planning to build efficiency apartment style units on our Southside Bethlehem campus with the help of neighborhood partners and the American Rescue Plan. We will acquire an additional property and use it to grow the number of available New Bethany managed housing units, and in doing so, we will be able to create safe housing to accommodate vulnerable populations who today have few places to go. Families with children, single women, and members of the LGBTQ+ community will have more options towards the end of safe and secure, affordable housing. So this is long-term temporary housing to give a place for people to stay for 1 year, 2 years, however long it takes, while searching for the right job, transportation, childcare, and ultimately a new home. So temporary housing is a common part of the American experience. So how many of us, myself included, have lived somewhere happily as a member of community in your neighborhood for 1 or 2 years before moving on to your next place of living? And that's exactly what this is. New Bethany will provide the case management and wraparound support services to help you get to where you need to be. And none of this would be possible without the tireless work and dedication of the New Bethany team. Our housing-focused staff is in attendance today, taking up most of the first 2 rows. Thank you for being here. Since the start of the pandemic, this team has ushered and been the stewards of federal dollars and ushered out $11 million for housing assistance in just the Bethlehem area, and that's for over 2,500 families over the past 3 years since the start of the pandemic. They are all right here, and thank you for acknowledging them. And then, most importantly, the American Rescue Plan and community project funding would not be possible one bit without the tireless work of our elected representatives. So Senator Casey and Congressman Wild, thank you very much for looking out for the community of Bethlehem, the Lehigh Valley. Thank you so much.
So one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and those of you that have heard us talk about ARPA before have talked about our goals. And we have goals that don't just come from inside City Hall, but they come from our collaboration with our school district, with our community partners, with our nonprofit partners. And one of the things that Senator Casey and I were talking about upstairs is the idea of like, what was the point of ARPA? What was the point of the American Rescue Plan? And that really is where we came up with the lens of our pandemic recovery goals. And there's the 2 things that we talk about over and over again, City Council talks about it, we talk about it all the time, is how do we balance out the idea of short-term recovery with the long-term investments that our community needs, and how do we make sure that those that we're not just trying to spend dollars in the next couple of years, but we're trying to come up with systemic solutions and try to make them sustainable and permanent solutions. So once again, the lens by which what ARPA is allowing us to do as a city is be able to get dollars out the door to help those that were most affected by the pandemic, but then also invest in the systems. We are trying to prevent the problem. We are not trying to just put a Band-Aid on it. The pandemic showed that a lot of things were broken. I think we all remember the way we felt in 2020 and 2021 when the pandemic was going on. And Senator Casey, you and Congresswoman Wild, you didn't just listen, you went and you did something about it. And it's giving us, as I said, a transformative opportunity in the city of Bethlehem here. So if we take a look at how we have spent some of our ARPA dollars, in 2022, we spent $7.2 million in a combination of areas through our Community Recovery Fund to do a lot of our early housing and homelessness work, as well as capital expenditures and our lost revenue. We talk a lot about how we don't do anything alone, and we don't do it alone in the mayor's office. And in this room right now, there's a lot of city employees, and there's a lot of people that just wake up every day and they come into City Hall or they go out onto our streets, whether or not there are police officers or firefighters or our paramedics or our streets workers, and they care about the community. And we talk all the time about the promises we make to them. And the ability of ARPA to help to pay for the lost revenue when businesses shut down in 2020 and 2021 has been a huge part of our stabilizing of our financial picture. If you take a look there at how we're planning on spending some of those dollars in 2023, there's a housing crisis in America. Senator, I'm sure you hear this everywhere you go in Pennsylvania. President Biden talks about it every week, is that we have a housing crisis. In Bethlehem alone, the price of a single-family home in the past 3 years has increased 52%. The price of a one-bedroom apartment has increased 57% over that same period of time, which is a crisis. We understand that. People talk about that throughout our community, and we are dedicating dollars for the first time on this level, which what it allows us to do is be a market participant. We used to have to be reactive, but now with the resources, Senator, that you have been able to deliver to us, we're able to be aggressive in accomplishing our goals. As we always say, the goal is not to feel like you're helping people, the goal is to help people. And to do that, you need resources. If you take a look up here, we have $3 million set alongside for our Community Recovery Fund. We have a lot of our hard work and city staff here today that are putting together those guidelines to be able to have that process kick off in a couple of months that will allow a lot of people in this room to be able to apply for those dollars. And they're the people that are on the front lines. We do a lot in City Hall, but there are partners that we have in our community that are right here that are really doing the hard work on the front lines of helping people out, and we want to help those people. We have $2 million set alongside for a homelessness initiative, and that's really just the beginning. We are not going to stop until we are able to do our part in the city of Bethlehem and put together that regional coalition about homelessness. And it is something that not everybody agrees on. As far as a priority, but rest assured, we are not going to stop until we make progress there. So that's kind of how we're spending dollars in the short term. But what the key is, and what we talk about, is what that's going to allow us to do in the long term. So if you take a look here at the city's financial picture over the past kind of 7 years, is we've been paying off debt aggressively. And those capital expenditures, those dollars that we have gotten from the federal government that help us to buy that public safety equipment, help us to pave those roads, that's going to allow us to not have to borrow money. And when you don't have to borrow money, you don't have to pay interest. And that frees up dollars within your general fund, within your city budget, to be able to help people out and to be able to make investments for the first time. Those of you that are familiar with our budget knows that a lot of our community investments come from the federal government through community development block grant funding, which we're always appreciative for. But what this is going to allow us to do for the first time is make those permanent investments. So every year we can guarantee the fact that there is going to be a line item in the city budget because of ARPA that's going to be able to allow us to be able to get money out to our community organizations. Right there, by 2026, thanks to ARPA, we will have paid off almost $95 million in debt. Our revenue and our debt is going to be flipped. In 2015, I think our revenue was about $75 million. By 2026, we're going to be looking at like 105, 110 million in revenue and a rapidly declining debt to revenue ratio. And you don't see a lot of cities with that trajectory, and it wouldn't be possible without Senator Casey and ARPA. And then just one more slide. I was inspired, Senator Casey, by your 67 maps on election night, so I needed to go through this quickly. But what does this mean? What is our vision? Our vision is that over the next 4 years, or next 3 years, we'll be able to use those ARPA dollars to be able to make those community investments. But at the bottom there, also use those ARPA dollars to make those public infrastructure investments and avoid the new debt. Why is that important? Because look where it leads us in 2026 and beyond. That financial stability plus the reduced debt payments equals permanent community investment. The idea that we're not just going to be paying for the same things that the city has always been paying for. This type of balancing of the short-term and long-term needs of our community is the equation that we think, quite honestly, every city throughout the state and the country should be using, and this is the way that we need to be talking about it, is the idea that ARPA is going to change lives, not only in the short term, but also in the long term. And I would just finish by saying, Senator Casey, there's a lot of distrust in government, a lot. People say, oh, if you vote for me, are you going to do this, you're going to do this. You have kept your promises. You've been to Bethlehem for years. Congressman Wild has spent a lot of time in Bethlehem coming and listening, not just to me, but to our community partners. And you went to Washington and you delivered. And it is something that we can't say thank you enough for what it's going to allow us to do as a city, and what it's going to allow future leaders to do, and what it's going to allow community organizations. So, thank you, Senator Casey.
No, thanks very much. almost missed my cue there, Mayor. But thanks so much, and I really appreciate that presentation, which I think tells one of the stories about the American Rescue Plan that we have not told, and that's the impact that it's had on communities. And I was telling the mayor earlier that this story, the story of Bethlehem, and it's not simply a story about the American Rescue Plan, of course, it's a story of a community coming together to, as the graphic shows us, to build a stronger city, a better city, a city that's well positioned for the future. But it was, I should say, long overdue that the federal government worked in full partnership with a city like Bethlehem to help advance that story. And the American Rescue Plan continues to play a big role in that. But it cannot happen. That kind of progress, that kind of growth cannot happen without good leadership. And Mayor, I want to thank you, as well as your predecessors who worked on this as well, and members of council and so many others, not just in government and public and private sector coming together to move the city forward. But too often in the past, the federal government was off to the side, checking in every once in a while, putting little investments here and there, but not really having the substantial or even seismic impact that the American Rescue Plan has had. And in some ways, the American Rescue Plan might be one of the most popular pieces of legislation years from now. So we'd like to inform folks about what it's doing right now, last year, this year, and in the next couple of years, and then the benefit that pays for the future. I was saying to the mayor, I mean, one of the great features of the American Rescue Plan is not that it just delivered dollars to rescue or help rescue communities in a pandemic. That was important, obviously. But also, I think it demonstrated to a lot of us in Washington, and when I say a lot of us, I mean Democrats, Republicans, House and Senate, that when you make these investments, you can, as the mayor said, change people's lives. Just consider the presentation that the mayor just made. In fact, maybe that last slide, if we can just go back to that. That last slide, I think, bears repeating on the right side. Financial stability plus reduced debt payments equals permanent community investment commitment. We have not talked nearly enough about the role that investments like the American Rescue Plan pays when it comes to that kind of permanent, substantial and positive impact on a community. So I blame myself, my party in Congress, for not talking about this enough. But part of it is that you had to vote the right way at the beginning. Unfortunately, the American Rescue Plan was enacted into law by a very, very close margin, and all the votes were provided by one side of the aisle in the House and the Senate. And I include in that United States Representative Susan Wild and her work to get this done in the House, and then the work that we had to do in the Senate to get it done. But for the life of me, I can't understand why there's been so much criticism, so much hot air spewed by Washington politicians. I won't say exactly who they are, but I think you get a sense of who they are. A lot of that hot air criticizing, not just voting against the American Rescue Plan, but then criticizing the impact, and frankly lying about it over and over and over again, all of 2021 after it was passed in March of 21, and then continuing those lies in March, or I should say, throughout 2022. And I bet if you get some of them again, this year in 2023, they'll continue to tell those lies. But the impact is now becoming more evident. The impact even of those initiatives in the American Rescue Plan that expired, and I think in one case tragically expired, like the child tax credit. We took an existing tax credit that's designed for a very specific purpose, to help families raise their children and use the tax code to help those families. It's one of the best ideas in American government in the last 50 years. but it wasn't doing the job that it should have been doing. So we took that existing tax credit and just made it more generous. And that meant that child poverty in the United States of America over the course of just about 6 months was reduced by some 40% across the nation. And in some places a lot more than 40%, 50% or higher. If you look at it this way, in Pennsylvania, 85% of the children in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania benefited from that child tax credit. Why is that a bad idea, Washington? Why is that a bad idea? That finally Washington said, we're going to use the tax code, not like it's been used for 40 years, just to reward big corporations and very wealthy Americans. That's the story of the last 40 years. I don't like saying that, but I think that's the truth. Because of the power of lobbyists and the influence on politicians, that tax code has been rigged over and over again for the corporate and the powerful and the wealthy. That's just a fact. Finally, in 2021, the United States Congress, not with a lot of help from both sides of the aisle, I'll mention, but the United States Congress said, we are going to make a tax change that substantially helps children and families. Substantially helps them. People said, oh my God, you can't do that. The tax code is really for, according to Washington, is supposed to be used for the corporate and the wealthy. We said no to that. We said not one penny to them. We're going to give the benefit to families. What did that mean here in the Lehigh Valley? Lehigh County, 70,000 children benefited, were eligible for that enhanced credit, or I should say and their families by extension. In Northampton County, 52,000 children. Just in 2 counties, it's more than 120,000 children. That's a good thing when you can lower child poverty. I talked to 2 moms here in the Lehigh Valley back in, I guess it was late 2021. I said, how has this child tax credit helped you? And they said, we've been able to sign our children up for school activities that we couldn't afford before. If you join a club or you join some activity and it costs $75 or $100 or $50, whatever the number is, they weren't able to do it before. Just imagine that. I'm setting aside the huge impact on food insecurity. That was the #1 utilization of that tax credit. Families are buying food to feed themselves and their children. And people in Washington said it was a bad idea. Why should we do that? So if anything, we should take that idea and the American Rescue Plan on the child tax credit and do it again. Make it permanent policy. Why is that not a good idea for the United States of America? It enhances our national security when children have enough to eat, when families have a place to live. And the investments that the city has already made in housing investments. I'm going to read some of those investments because they bear repeating when the mayor made reference to it and when Mark made reference to it in the context of what New Bethany Ministries is doing. Just in terms of the American Rescue Plan dollars for the city of Bethlehem, more than $34 million, and the mayor was outlining how some of that money is being allocated. But using $5 million for its affordable housing fund, that's a good idea. It might not have been possible, or at least not the dollar amounts, without the American Rescue Plan. $2 million for the homelessness initiative. And so when people say, well, the federal government can't have an impact on people's lives in a city like Bethlehem, I say, watch us do it through the American Rescue Plan. When parents know that they have a safe place for their families to live, they can contribute more to the economy. That's helping all of us when we're helping someone be able to afford housing or have a place to live, especially in these terribly harsh winter months that are upon us and ahead of us. When children have healthy food to eat, they can focus on going to school and graduating. Why is that a bad idea to make those investments? I have to say to Washington, if anything, the American Rescue Plan isn't something we should look back on and just pat ourselves on the back and say, wow, that was great. Was great. No, it should be an inspiration for us to do it again. I'm not saying pass a brand new rescue plan, but take elements of it, like the housing investments, like these investments in families like the child tax credit, and say do it again, and even if we can, to the extent that we can, make it permanent. This is how just as we're making investments in Bethlehem and working with all of you because you've all done the hard work to move your city forward, we should be doing that everywhere. Make our country stronger. Talk to anyone in the United States military. They need recruits. And a child who doesn't have enough to eat, or a place to live, or a chance to succeed in school, can't serve in the military, can't keep us safe. We need these investments in our children, not because we're called to make these investments on a moral basis. It's important for our security, our national security, in the fight against terrorism, the fight against people who would do us harm around the world. These investments are important in terms of our national security. And as the mayor just demonstrated in a very compelling fashion, this is about fiscal and financial security as well when you make these investments. So I hope the days are over when Washington isn't simply a place where you rig the tax code year after year because the power of some people to ram through changes that help big companies and big corporations. They're going to do just fine. They don't need much help. They've been getting it for 40 years. It's about time we invested in families and communities. And I think the American Rescue Plan was a clarion call to do more of that. Even at our worst in Washington, once in a while we learn when something works and is a good idea, we should do it again. And I think Bethlehem is demonstrating that you can use these dollars efficiently and effectively to make these investments in the future. And one of the things that I'm proudest of about these investments is it's helping every corner of our state. In fact, we're here talking about a city, an urban community, like so many other urban communities that has all the struggles that it does. But this American Rescue Plan is helping rural areas as much as anything we've done in many, many years. That's why I can't understand why there wasn't more support for it. But the good news is we got it done. It's a good idea, and we have to keep making these investments. And I think those of you who are, and I see members of law enforcement here and who've been in public safety understand those investments are critical. Now, I'm not going to get into, because we're talking about the American Rescue Plan, I promised the mayor I wouldn't get into this today, but I'm not going to get into those who voted the wrong way. Representative Wild voted the right way. Those who voted the wrong way, not even a month ago, on that, it's known by that big Latin name, omnibus. It's the spending bill for the federal government for the rest of the fiscal year. So we got it passed in December. That meant we could fund the government between that date, or the date the president signed it in December, and September 30th. I couldn't get over the overwhelming number of votes against that. When you vote against something like that, just like when you voted against the American Rescue Plan, you were voting against all the money for law enforcement, all the money for this priority and that priority, that some people who are spewing the hot air say they care about, and then they vote against the money. Now that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I think one of those moments when it didn't make sense is when they voted against the American Rescue Plan. So there's a lot here to be positive about, and I think, if anything, Bethlehem has demonstrated two lessons for us. One is how to use these dollars efficiently and effectively to make the short-term kind of rescue investments, COVID-related investments in short-term housing and relief, but also to use those dollars as well for long-term investment, as the mayor so compellingly demonstrated here. And I think Bethlehem has also taught us a second lesson, which is we need to go to other places around the state and talk about it in this fashion. Because a lot of people living in cities and suburban communities and rural communities don't know this story. And I'm going to spend some time in 2023 to tell this story the story not just of Bethlehem, but the story of our Commonwealth and our country. Thanks very much, everybody.
Senator, thank you for coming, and I'm never the guy not to tell that story about who voted against it. But I really want to thank you. I want to thank your staff, Amy Cozy, who was one of the people to work so hard, as well as everybody else in the office, and I see Megan here from Congresswoman Wild's office. Just thank you for this. This is something that means a lot to us. And I think the passion that you hear in Mark and my voice, if you had a chance to talk to everybody else that's here, they have the same passion about helping people. And, we really appreciate that. And I guess I just would end by saying, we were talking about how I used to be a school teacher over at Allen High School. And I remember one of those things that teachers get difficult about sometimes is when the students don't have a pen or a pencil. And I remember there was a student there that came in and he didn't have a pencil, and he sat down and and I just was doing everything else, and finally I went over to him and he said, I don't have a pencil, I didn't bring one, but if you give me a pencil, I'll do the work. And I gave him a pencil and he did the work, and I kept giving him a pencil. And essentially what you and Congressman Wild have done is given our community that pencil. And now it's on us to do the work. So thank you. Thank you for everybody.